The following program contains content that may not be suitable for children. Parental discretion is advised.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. I am flying solo today. I do not have my co-host Steve Carlin with me. It makes me very sad and also very happy as well. And I'm sure you, the viewers and listeners, understand both of those emotions in Steve's absence. But we continue to go through what is a doctor phase of the 40 Days for Life podcast. If you have not listened to Dr. Haywood Robinson and I's interview of Dr. George Delgado from a couple of weeks ago, go back and listen to that. He is the man that discovered, invented, started promoting abortion pill reversal, which we know is so important in a post-Roe America as the deregulation of these abortion pills has gone quite insane. We will be doing some upcoming podcasts on the new FDA director. I have done a couple of interviews on that. The old FDA director was absolutely useless in this area, and we have challenged the new director to do what President Trump and Vice President Vance and even RFK have asked the FDA to do, which is to investigate how these abortion pills were even allowed, and certainly to regulate or ban them altogether. So I look forward to sharing more information about that, but we definitely have challenged the FDA to do that. So we need to pray for the new director that he has the fortitude and the courage to do so. So on this podcast, we will have yet another doctor, my good friend, Dr. Monique Ruberu, who is a longtime local 40 Days for Life leader in the town of Philadelphia, which she has tolerated my Philadelphia disdain for many, many years. She is also a OBGYN and trained in NAPRO technology. We're going to talk about that. So she is, quote, an NFP OBGYN, also a wonderful local 40 Days for Life leader, and has served on the board of 40 Days for Life for many years and was recently voted as board chair of 40 Days for Life. So it is wonderful to have Dr. Monique on the podcast, joining me from the great city of Philadelphia. Monique, how are you?
I'm so great, John. Thanks so much for having me. And despite the fact that I'm from Philadelphia.
I know, and there was once a discussion of her trying to have a 40 Days for Life leader symposium in Philadelphia, and leaders continue to thank me today for refusing to follow her suggestion. It was well intended; it was from the heart. But we have talked a lot, obviously, about Philadelphia on the podcast with the Mark Houck case, which had a great victory this last spring. But today, I want to talk to you about a number of things, because you're a little bit of a Renaissance woman in that you do everything that is pro-life and medicine. But I want to pick up just on where I left off, because this FDA thing recently happened. Do you have any thoughts, or are you encouraged, or are you discouraged by, number one, the FDA in general? I know it's going through a lot of what seems to be positive changes under RFK. They've been dragging their feet on the abortion pills. And so what were your overall thoughts when you saw the resignation and then the new appointment?
Well, it's always a good thing when we have a change of seats, when we have new people coming in, because then there's an opportunity for us to actually move minds and hearts, and particularly pray for that particular individual, and know that even when we can't walk through walls and we might not be able to move hearts as easily, God always can, right? So never, ever forget the power of prayer. And I have hope that somehow God will bring about Saul to Paul conversions, and that things will move forward, because we know in the end, we know who wins. And we all know that abortion is the greatest evil, so it's got to go.
Yeah, and it's very well put. And the new guy is pro-life. He was actually an attorney working for a large firm that was hired by Planned Parenthood, and he recused himself from taking on that case, citing his pro-life stance. So that's the kind of courage we need at the FDA. But it just seems with the massive deregulation of abortion pills, using COVID, and then eventually it was a knee-jerk reaction, as you know, to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and the Biden administration and the FDA just started handing these things out like peanut M&Ms, and it's been detrimental to women, obviously, certainly to babies, and it's become, it went from, I think, 72%. 76% of all abortions, that dropped to 63% in 2025. One of my theories, it could be wrong, was that it has a very bad word of mouth. The abortion pills from the women themselves. We know of our mutual friend, Abby Johnson, and other former Planned Parenthood workers, and some current Planned Parenthood workers who talk women out of doing RU46 because of their own personal experience. And so that's kind of an encouraging thing. But if you look at, I was at a meeting in DC last week, and this guy said if they just went to pre-Biden regulations, most of these Planned Parenthoods that are remaining would go out of business, because 80% of the pills are still distributed through brick and mortar, which is how Planned Parenthood's kind of surviving. And so even if, obviously, we want to ban them altogether, but even if you just went to basic regulations where you have to, everybody has to go somewhere, we're just not going to mail them, it would have a tremendous impact.
Definitely. And I mean, the thing with the abortion pills, I absolutely hate them, but at the same time, it does give us as pro-lifers that additional 72 hours to be able to respond and kind of move hearts. So often women are having regret after they choose abortion, but in this particular case, there's something that we can do about it. And so many of the women that I serve through abortion pill reversal, this is their story. They take the abortion pill, somebody's pushed them into it, or they've felt hopeless and they felt like this was their only way out. But the minute they swallow that pill, they have such intense regret. And when we have people outside the abortion centers with 40 Days for Life lovingly being present and offering them another option, then it's great, because they can look up 40 Days for Life, they can look up abortion pill reversal, and they can get help. So it's beautiful. I mean, some of these babies behind me, babies that have been abortion pill reversal. So it definitely helps.
It's so beautiful, and you're the only leader in this position, besides probably Dr. Donato, who's on our team, who's a doctor and a lawyer and a campaign leader. So you're recruiting volunteers to get them out at the 40 Days for Life campaign, and then those volunteers, and many times yourself, are then offering abortion pill reversal. And then if they choose that option, you put on another hat and actually administer the abortion pill reversal. So you're just sort of doing everything, even though we obviously don't care about women once they choose life. You're not in that stereotype.
Bring them into the office and do their ultrasound, and then organize their baby shower, and for the community for them to walk with. Yeah, we don't care at all.
Yeah, you're really, you are a pro-abortion apologetics nightmare. I mean, it's really hard to kind of accuse you of a lot of things. So that's really, really great. Talk about that, because you've been in the pro-life movement so long. How did abortion pill reversal change your practice, I guess? Because all of a sudden we had this huge tool.
I learned about abortion pill reversal very early on in my personal kind of reversion, because I'd always been personally pro-life, but I had never felt like I could tell other people what to do. And then when God saved my marriage and he really put it on my heart that I need to do something to pay him back, stepping outside of that abortion center for the first time and actually witnessing what it was like to watch these 30 plus women and walking into that place and then walk out devastated. That was the beginning of me jumping into the abortion pro-life arena and really wanting to, help and do everything I could to serve God in this way. And I was blessed in that abortion pill reversal had been present from that moment. So the minute that I jumped in, I heard about abortion pill reversal, and I was like, okay, this is the obvious solution to that. And very quickly, I called them up and I was like, how can I do this? I'm an OBGYN physician, and they were super excited to onboard me and teach me everything I needed to know. So I've never known a time in my pro-life mind where abortion pill reversal didn't exist. But I'm sure for those who were fighting abortion long before I had my real jump in, it must have been like life changing to know that there's something that you can do to actually save a life once the mom has actually chosen abortion and walked through the process of receiving an abortion. So,
Yeah, I told Dr. Delgado to his face. What year was this? Whenever you first heard about it?
so I probably 2013,
Okay.
2014.
Yeah. Yeah, the first time I heard of it was I visited the San Diego Vigil, and I was late to my plane. I'd gone to like 10 vigils in Southern California, and I was just trying to get away so that I could jump in my car. And our wonderful leader, who passed away, the great Gene Valinsky, like chased me down. And Gene was like 82 years old, but he still could run. And so he chased me down in my rental car, and he's like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you this one thing. This is October of '09." He said, there's a new thing. We're going to save a lot of babies. It's called abortion pill reversal. And I've just immediately in my mind, I thought, just when Gene seemed like a totally normal pro-lifer, now he's nuts. Okay, now we got to consider getting rid of him, right? I said, you can't really reverse an abortion. He's like, yeah, you can, through the pills. He hands me a brochure, and he's like, just read it in the airport. And so I drove to the airport thinking he was crazy, and then read the brochure, and of course, it made sense, and then it was my intro to Dr. Delgado, and that was the beginning. But I told Dr. Delgado I thought it was made up. It sounds like a total scam or false hope. Anyways, that's the way I looked at it. Let me ask you, because we do these podcasts, and if we talk about abortion pill reversal, we'll get like an email 6 months later from somebody saying, hey, I heard about this, and then I offered it to a woman, and she's chosen life, and it's these great stories. But we also get that on contraception, which has always been this kind of weird thing that all Christians were against until 1932, and now it's like the Catholics are the only ones that teach it, but 90% of the Catholics just ignore that teaching, and contraception is this great thing and actually a responsible thing. And of course, we're both young. So, but our generation grew up where this became popular or well known. I remember like in 8th grade in high school, I learned about natural family planning, and that, could speak to why contraception was bad. We started having like people like Scott Hahn or Protestants converting because they discovered the church's teaching on contraception, and then decided to read everything else and whatever, became Catholic. But there's this growing trend. And RFK has kind of been part of this, where we want less medicine and we don't all want these fake hormones in our body, and contraception kind of has this stigma. And I know my father-in-law, who when he had his NFP, practice, he would have half the room were these great moms, Catholic moms or Protestant moms, that were on NFP, who all had like 5 or 6 or 7 kids. And that was one half of the waiting room. And the other half were like the granola hippie, I don't want any medicine, like those people. So I'm sure you get everybody in your office.
Like my office group.
Yeah, it's just like, so, and they all got along, right? They're all on the same team, I guess. But talk about that as far as, did you always have that in your practice? And also, when you say I'm an OBGYN and I don't prescribe contraception, it's like a McDonald's owner saying I have a McDonald's and we actually don't sell fries. It's just, you seem like a complete alien. How do you respond to that in medicine and to those outside of medicine?
Yeah. So for me, it was a totally different path, right? Because I went to a traditional medical school and residency, and I had my real reversion. Like, I was always a Catholic. I was just a cafeteria Catholic forever. And then I had my real reversion in that 2012, 2013 year. And it was then after, like, I was already a fully fledged OBGYN practicing, doing all the wrong stuff. I wasn't doing abortions intentionally, but I had been writing contraceptives all the way through residency and through my beginnings of my practice. And what happened was when I finally realized that there was an alternative, when somebody outside of the abortion center, my co-leader, Patrick Stanton, gave me the book about NAPR technology. I had never heard of NAPR technology in my life, natural procreative technology. And this was the solution that I needed, something that I could do instead of the contraceptives. Because when you are a physician, this is all that you're taught. For every symptom, for every issue, whether it be abnormal bleeding or PMS symptoms or irregular cycles or PCOS or painful periods or whatever, the solution is a birth control pill. It's all about shutting down the cycles and covering up the symptoms, but it's never about understanding what the true root cause is of the issue and trying to address that. And so the way that I was taught, I knew in the back of my head that the Catholic Church did not agree with this, but I didn't even really delve deep to find out why or what the deal was, because I didn't know any other way of practicing. So I thought, if I have to give up contraceptives, I have to stop being an OBGYN. Really. And so when I received that book and I realized that you could actually monitor somebody's cycles, understand where they're ovulating, do perfectly timed tests for that particular individual to understand what the root cause is of their issues, it made so much sense to me. And when I understood that I could use this instead of contraceptives, it was life-changing. Like that day itself, I remember walking to the drug cupboard, opening it up, pulling out all the contraceptives, reading the fine print on every one of them, and saying, yes, that's an abortifacient, and that's an abortifacient, and that's an abortifacient, and that's an abortifacient. And it was mind-blowing. I was like, never again. I'm never writing any of these ever again, because the number one priority in my life at that moment in time and now is I've got to serve God, and I've got to be practicing in every aspect of my life in a way which I can look him straight in the face and be okay with what I've said and what I've done. And there's nothing more important to me than that. So the concept of NAPR technology, yes, every medical physician who is not a pro-life doctor or is not more into natural medicine looks at me and they're like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why aren't you just writing the contraceptives? This is crazy. Like, you're some quack doctor. But the people who are actually intelligent and they're willing to understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, then it starts to tweak their interest, because they're like, oh, I never really thought about, the timing of these tests or the symptoms that your body gives to let you understand what's going on or what the purpose of tracking is or any of those things. So there are people who definitely are more interested in learning more, but through the medical community, it's very much fear-based. Like, as they're training us, the number one thing is, if you step outside of this box, you're going to be sued. And so that's deep in the hearts and the minds of most physicians. Their main number one objective is to avoid being sued.
Yeah.
And so they have a real desire to stay away from anything that is different or uncommon, and very unwilling usually to step outside.
Which is obviously it's terrible what lawyers have done to medicine. And in some cases, it's terrible what medicine has done, to medicine. And as you know, I'm very pro-medicine. I'm not I know medicine was deeply hurt, rightly so, with the COVID pandemic and just a lot of the stuff that came out. But I'm not we don't use doctors. I don't operate like that. Some people do. But I believe in good medicine, and you obviously, represent that. Ironically, in Texas, I heard this ad again the other day. There is this massive lawsuit on behalf of all these women suing. I forget which company. There's no need to bring it up, but they're being sued because they did not tell them that these contraceptives could cause cancer, and apparently the lawsuit claims that they knew about it, and the birth control pill can cause cancer is something that like the crazy pro-lifers said in the 90s and nobody paid attention. And now we're much more aware of what we put in our bodies. We're much more probably skeptical of, just the whole take a pill culture. And so it's interesting. I would think and hope that more, particularly younger doctors, and maybe we'll see this with Gen Z, that they're open to that. That it's like, oh, you don't prescribe contraception, you're an OBGYN, why is that? Because ironically, if we're going to do we're afraid of the lawyers, well, you could get in trouble the other direction too by just prescribing it to everybody and not thinking about it.
Definitely. I mean, there's a million and one side effects when it comes to shutting down your cycle and trying to suppress what's naturally there. So women suffer a lot when it comes to the use of contraceptives, and many of them don't realize that they're suffering unnecessarily, that there are other things that could be done that actually help them to solve the issue. I think the biggest issue in our country is the issue with infertility, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like the majority of the women who are dealing with fertility challenges are women who had very solvable issues if they were addressed early on. And even at this point, they're still solvable issues. But what happens is they're given a contraceptive from the get-go. All of their symptoms are covered up. And then all of a sudden they get married and they're like, okay, now I'm ready to have a child. So then they peel off the contraceptive and all of those underlying issues start to rear their head again. But this time they've gotten worse and worse because the body has been suppressed so much. So you have all of this dominance of certain hormones and causes more issues than it really needed to start off with. And so then all of a sudden they're being seen by this IVF doctor, and the IVF doctor does a very cookie cutter workup for every single person. It's exactly the same. And then they're told, oh, you have unexplained infertility, and then your only option is IVF. And then wham, bam, here you go. They're running down that pathway, and it's over and over and over. So it's crazy.
Those are so connected too. And people don't realize it. The West is so insane. We're the only, civilization that would insist on paying for contraception to prevent kids, and then paying for in vitro to artificially, create kids, and call ourselves pro-family during that whole process. But there's a lot of confusion. We've done a lot of IVF podcasts, so we'll post them in the show notes. But that is our notion of control. And, in the history, if you just take Catholicism, the church wasn't, running around going, it's an abortifacient. They didn't know. It was based on natural law. And that the best explanation I ever heard of Catholic teaching was from an evangelical pastor who's Randy Alcorn, who was very anti-contraception. And his book years ago, Pro-Life Answers to Pro-Choice Arguments, he has this sort of epilogue on contraception. And it was like, oh, this is how you're going to, in the book, this is interesting. And he talks about how he's against it based on the Bible, and how he basically lays out God's in control of our entire life. And as a Catholic, and yet we hold this off in fertility. As a Catholic, it really struck me coming from him, because Catholics we're useless when it comes to this area of just sort of sometimes, typically, I'll stereotype because we know that stereotypes are true. Most Catholics, they don't think about God being Lord of everything, right? And then you meet like a good Baptist or a good evangelical, and they're like, well, God provided that parking space, and, it was raining outside, and we're now closer to the movie theater. Praise God. And we kind of like maybe be like, okay, that kind of gives me the creeps. But they actually believe it, and it's good, and it's authentic. But in the area of tithing, evangelicals smoke everybody. It's not even close. Catholics give no money. It's like really ridiculous and embarrassing. And part of it, I know the scandals have done some of that. But before all that, before 2002, when all that came out, the Catholics just didn't tithe. And I grew up in a little Baptist town, And the Baptist church, it could have like 500 members and they'd have like a new gym and a Starbucks and all this cool stuff. And it's like, we can't raise money to like fix the roof of the cathedral. It was wild. And I thought about that of just, he is Lord of your finances. He's Lord of
Yeah.
what house you're going to buy. He's Lord of your job. And he's Lord of, where you're going to send your kids to school. But he's not Lord of your fertility. And the author of fertility and the great giver of this tremendous gift where we get to co-create with God, that's what we're going to control. That's what we're going to manipulate. That's what we're going to give over to big pharma, and with good intentions, thinking, yeah, but I mean, we can't have 12 kids. And this entitlement of we get to decide how many kids we have. And if we can't have kids, we get to decide that we actually can, because infertility is a cross, and you help naturally, help people carry that or solve it and get them a baby. But that's how we got into IVF. And I think that mentality where you look at it from 100,000-foot view, that this is unnatural, but it comes from a place of love, of giving yourself up to God and trusting his divine providence and, having a baby. I don't think I have any credibility on this because the average person would be like, dude, you got 8 kids. We're not listening to you about this. Like, I don't want 8 kids. And for me, that's been a blessing of my life. And we know couples that use NFP and could only have 2 kids, or, it can also help you if you do have infertility. It can help you conceive. But I just think that mentality, which the church has always had, is so beautiful, and it makes sense to people when you explain it. It's not a weird Catholic thing or a weird, granola hippie thing. It's natural, and it's the way we're made, and the lack of desire for children in a marriage is unnatural. That doesn't mean it's a race, and it's the first one to 15 kids gets the better, suite in heaven. It doesn't work like that. That can be a sin, but it can definitely give clarity to marriage, and definitely makes you trust God more.
Definitely. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, every baby is an absolute gift, and there's nothing like the gift of having your own children. It's the greatest gift you could ever imagine. And so,
yeah. And I want to back up a little bit. Whenever you said you had the moment, which is pretty cool as an image of like you're reading the fine print, and you're like, oh my gosh, it is an abortifacient. And you said, that's it. Because most of the NFP OBGYNs I know, they didn't have that kind of St. Paul getting knocked off the horse. It was a long, I know with my father-in-law, I know with others, it was a gradual, long, the wife praying, the priest yelling at him over dinner, like all those kind of things have to happen, him personally praying. And then it's this revelation. You didn't have that. So when you looked up and you were like, I'm done. What did that look like? I mean, did you get fired? Did you start your own practice?
yeah, so it was really funny actually, because I was working in a Catholic hospital, right? But it was Catholic by name. And I went and I made an appointment with administration, and I said, okay, I want to work part-time. I want to change my style of practice so I'm no longer writing contraceptives. I want you guys to pay for me to go for training to Nebraska so that I can learn this NAPR technology stuff. And I thought that she was going to like spin her head off and like kick me out of the office, honestly. But God is so amazing, and he prepares things way in advance that we could ever be, walking into the space even. And he had created Patrick Stanton's father, John Stanton. And John Stanton was the founder of the Pro-Life Union in Philadelphia. He created all these crisis pregnancy homes. He would like house people in his own home, even though he had 12, 13 kids of his own. And this man, for weeks on end, for months on end, he did several things. Number one, every day at Mass, he would pray that God would send a pro-life OBGYN. And number two, Number two, he would go to that Catholic hospital where I worked, and over he would bug administration, and he would say, this is a Catholic hospital. You need a NAPRA technology trained physician. Here is the textbook. This is what you need to do. You need to hire someone. So he bugged them so much that they were actually trying to convince one of my partners in my office to do NAPRA technology. Like, the textbook for NAPRA technology was literally 8 feet away from my office, in my office manager's office, for years before I knew anything about NAPRA technology. And that guy refused to do it. So when I went in, they had already been looking for someone to do NAPRA technology for over a year. And so when I said this, I was expecting to be like blown off, but they were like, wait, you want to do NAPRA technology? Oh, this solves our problem. Yes, you help our Catholic identity in the hospital if you want to do this. And so, yes, we'll pay for you to go. And yes, you can do this, but you cannot practice in your current practice. If you practice in this way, we have to move you to your own separate practice, because we don't want anybody comparing the way that you practice and the way other people practice. So I was like, no, I don't want to be a solo practitioner. I just want to work in the group, and I just don't want to write contraceptives. I still want to deliver babies. I still want to do all these things. But when I said that I was no longer willing to write contraceptives, all of the other women that were in my cross-covering group went to administration and told them that they were no longer willing to cross-cover with me because I was not writing contraceptives anymore.
Wow.
And administration was not strong enough to stand up and say, what are you talking about? She's not doing anything wrong. We pay all your bills. You just darn well cross-cover with her. So instead, they said, you've got to stop doing obstetrics. You can only do gynecology. We're going to cut your pay by about $30,000. You will now have to go and work as the house doctor, like basically the scat monkey for the other doctors, and assist them with their C-sections and stay up late and, triage their patients so that they can go home and have dinner with their families. And that even won't make up your salary completely, but you can do your NAPRA technology and we'll put you in a separate office. So
Wow.
there was a lot that happened straight off the bat and a lot of persecution. But when I finally realized, when I got through the anger phase and I finally, was okay with God, you can please love them through me because I don't really like them anymore. And when all of that was said and done, I really understood that all of that persecution was his plan to help grow me. And every step along the way, as challenging as it was, every bit of that was a complete blessing, because in my willingness to stand up and walk through all of that, he opened so many doors for me. Like, even following that, when I opened my own practice, I had to learn how to be a business owner. I had to learn how to, manage the people in my office. I had to learn all of these different skills that I had never learned as a physician. And very slowly, the hospital realized that I was not making the money that they wanted me to make in this practice. So they tried to offload me. And so they would say, okay, you need to actually own this office, and you need to now own the people who work for you. And every step along the way, I was kicking and screaming, and I was like, no, I just want to be an employee. I want my benefits. I want my employees to have their benefits. And I just want to do the work. I don't want to own my own practice. I don't want to be a private practice owner. But they were pretty insistent. And what ultimately happened was COVID came along, and then I refused the COVID vaccine. And then they took away my privileges at the hospital, and they kicked me out of my office. But if all of that hadn't happened, if they hadn't pushed me to become an independent practitioner and to own my own practice and to understand the business side of it, if I had been their employee and I'd refused the COVID vaccine, I would have lost everything.
Wow.
I would not have a practice. I would not have the ability to see patients. I would not have employees, nothing. But God arranged every bit of it so that right at the perfect time, when they finally cut my cord and they said, sorry, if you're not going to do the COVID vaccines, you've got to leave the hospital. We can't have you here. You don't have privileges. And by the way, we need your space. He found me a space like literally across the street that I was able to move in like within days. So I didn't miss a single day of office practice. He had me prepared so that I knew exactly what to do. I was able to just carry on as if nothing had happened. Didn't lose a single patient. I actually gained a whole bunch of patients because everyone was looking for the doctors that weren't going crazy with COVID. It was such a blessing. Like I can't even imagine things having gone a different way. It was such a blessing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love that you said they cut your cord, which is a great OBGYN joke. That's like that's a dad joke, Monique. I don't know, do you ever use that with your kids? Like you're getting on to them, you're like, oh, we'll cut the cord, you know, and they're like, we get it. We get it. You're a doctor. By the way, a quick question. Since I've been blessed with 8 children, I'm not a cut the cord guy. When did this trend happen? I respect all the guys that have done it or whatever. I'm not insulting them. When did this trend start of like the dad is now involved and he's cutting the cord? Because it was disturbing to me to be asked to do that.
Well, you know, like dads were not even in the room, right? Like
Yeah.
that sort of trend to like allow dads to even in the room
Right.
and like for them to see everything that happens, like that was, I'm sure in the 60s and the 50s, that was a no way. Like what man would want to sleep with his wife after he sees what happens in the delivery? Come on.
That was the thought.
But yeah, it's
Well,
as long as I was practicing OBGYN, the husband had the option to cut the cord.
yeah. And my
So
father-in-law
when
was there during the transition because he said the same thing. He's like, the men, because I was always looking around going, I don't even know if I should be here, but much less participating in the thing. But yeah, that is a in the show All in the Family. There's a great scene where Archie Bunker is talking to Meathead, who's the late great Rob Reiner, and he's wants to be in the room. It's like this new thing, and his wife wants him to be in the room. It's kind of this like feminist, like I'm not doing it alone and all this. And Archie pulls him aside and he's like, do you know what goes on in there? You're going to lose a leg, you know? And so it's like this mystery thing of a delivery room. So I love seeing the kids born and all that was great. And I did pretty good. The last 5, our friend who is also Mary Lisa's OBGYN, she was like, okay, you need to sit down. You look pale. And so I was commanded a few times by the doctors to move because I looked like I was going to pass out. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing. But the cutting the cord, don't email in if you've done this or your husband did it and criticize us. I'm just saying the cutting the cord. I don't know. It's like, I don't know, like we get up at a restaurant we're eating at, we go back and we start cutting tomatoes for the salad that we ordered. It's just like, well, I don't, this is not what I'm here for. So that aside, it's absolutely beautiful what you've done. And before we get into the app, because we got to talk about the app, I'm sure for people, you're a mom, you're a wife, you're running this practice, you had all this drama just because you're following your conscience. You also lead a 40 Days for Life campaign, which we've said many times outside of your presence is one of the best in the country. How do you manage your time and your sanity?
it's all God. It is
You've given up.
God. There is, none of it makes sense, Sean. I mean, like when I stop and I think about all the things that I have the privilege of doing, I mean, just even being on the national board for 40 Days for Life, like it's ridiculous. I remember a time when I first started entering into the pro-life community and I was reading Abby's book and I was like, wow, like I can't even imagine having a conversation with these people. And now it's like, you guys are my closest friends. It's so crazy, but it's totally God. He literally extends the hours and gives me time because it's that and understanding priority, right? Like understanding that God is number one, and then it comes my spouse, and then is my children, and then is my mission, and then is everything else. And, in between there, obviously my family and my close friends. But it's, if you put God as your number one priority in life, he will feed you, he will fill your holes, he will give you peace, he will give you joy. And with that, then you lean into your spouse and you can completely fill them up and they are filling you up. So you have all this added layers of energy and strength so that then you can take care of your kids and you can enjoy them and deal with the challenging things that come with having kids and all of those moments as well. And then you move into what is my mission and what does he have me to do and how can I do his work and bring more people into heaven and bring more people to his feet. And it's just, he opens doors and he gives you the strength that you need to do things. And he helps you find the time to sleep and to rest and recover and provides you with everything that you need along the way. But there is no other explanation for it. Everything good in my life is just, it's God.
It's a great answer. It's the answer. And, knowing you all these years and just, people, and then you get a different insight into their life. And I had the privilege of attending your dad's funeral years ago. And it was so awesome to hear about him, especially as a man. And just him coming from Sri Lanka and basically going door to door to get a job and having nothing. And it's just awesome American story, and then having a family and you and your all your siblings are so successful and hard workers, and that's definitely an underlying theme. When I heard about his life and the way he built y'all's life and your family, I was like, oh, well, no wonder Monique is Monique, and you're kind of like Superwoman because of just that work ethic too of what he did for y'all.
Yeah, he had a beautiful work ethic. He loved his work, and he really instilled that importance of the willingness to work. But number one was always, what would God say? So, yeah,
it's great. It's beautiful. Okay, so talk to us. Tell us, number one, when did you get the idea for this app?
Oh, yes. Okay, so the name of the app is NWH Cycle because my office is called Natural Women's Health. So NWH Natural Women's Health. The reason that I created this app, it's a cycle tracking app, and it is an app to help educate women on what is normal, what is abnormal, and give them a place that is safe for, especially for the younger girls, where they're not going to be inundated with information, which is just absolutely unnecessary and disgusting more than anything. The majority of patients that I would see in my office, when they would come in to talk to me about their medical issues, their bleeding patterns, their problems with pain with their periods, whatever, I would ask them very specific questions to try and figure out, do they have normal bleeding or do they have abnormal bleeding? And what I realized is that the majority of patients, as well as the majority of physicians, do not have a really good construct to understand what is normal and what is abnormal. And I think this has a lot to do with the fact that we live in such a contraceptive community or society, because when you start giving people contraceptives, then you don't have a very specific, hey, this is normal and this is abnormal. It's more like, oh, normal cycle lengths are anywhere between 24 and 36 days, and it's your normal and their normal and his or her normal. But that's not really the reality of the situation. So a normal cycle is 27 to 29 days. And if you have cycle lengths that are less than that, if they're 26 days or less, then most likely you have lower levels of progesterone, which ties into things like PMS symptoms, irregular cycles, early pregnancy loss, postpartum depression, like all of those things kind of come together. If you have cycle lengths that are longer than 29 days, then you likely have either polycystic ovarian syndrome or you will have hypothyroidism or thyroid dysfunction. And when I started to realize this as I went more and more into natural medicine, I also realized that even the people who are tracking the cycles, like with the different, symptothermal methods, Crichton fertility care, all of these beautiful methods, we're not really being super specific as to what is the quality of the bleeding. So they'll just tell a patient, hey, write down if you think your bleeding is normal or abnormal or heavy or light or moderate. But the patients are always relating this to what they've seen. So if their mom has had hemorrhaging their whole life and she's been dealing with it, they'll think that that's normal.
Hmm.
And if their mom has had like crazy light bleeding and that's what they've been exposed to, they'll think that's normal. So in the app, it's super easy for anybody who has never charted in their life to click on the calendar day, and then it opens up this panel and it will say, chart cycles. They hit it and it'll just ask them a series of questions. Are you bleeding? Yes or no? And if you're bleeding, what are you using to collect the blood? And so if you're using like a regular tampon, are you filling that in 1 to 3 hours, 4 to 7 hours, 8 to 12 hours, 14 to 16 hours? And then it will convert that information and it will tell you, you are having very heavy bleeding, or you're having very, very heavy bleeding, or you're having heavy bleeding or light bleeding or moderate bleeding. But that is something that is so important, because if a woman is having heavier bleeding, then that means that there's something underlying which is not correct. And it needs to be identified so that you can actually address the underlying issue. But if we ignore it and we just say, oh, okay, you're okay with your bleeding and you think it's normal, then that's fine, carry on. And that's when you run into issues with, hey, I have painful periods. Oh, do you have painful periods? Oh, pain is normal in the cycles. No, it's not. Pain is never normal. So there's all of these like things that have been taught to the physicians and to the patients all along. And it's like PMS symptoms are normal. Pain is normal. Heavy bleeding is fine as long as you're not like soaking through your clothes every time, or as long as you're not fainting, and as long as you're not having palpitations. So the purpose of the app is, number one, to teach people how to chart their cycles very simply so that they can have a way of tracking without having to learn a really complicated system, just by answering questions every day. And it's based on, you go to the bathroom, you wipe yourself, just making a couple of observations. And number two, if they have something that triggers an abnormal, then they have a whole video library in the app that gives them information about, like, you have very heavy bleeding, this is what this means. You have a ton of mucus throughout the cycle, this is what it means. You have tail and brown bleeding at the end of your period, this is what it means. This is why you should get it worked up, blah, blah, blah. And it also has a way, if they're interested, like if they notice all these abnormalities and they don't participate care with a doctor who has any understanding of this stuff, they can reach out to us if they're a part of the premium members. And then they can get us to look at their cycles, and they can get us to give them a chart review. And then we can start having conversations so that they'll have a little bit more of an understanding of what these issues may lead to or why they should care about this. So it's really just an educational tool, but it's available in Apple and iOS as well as in Android, and it's available all over the world. So anybody can access it. It's completely free to download and to use. The majority of the app you can use completely for free. And it's just if you want those premium features with a couple of extra longer videos, or you want me to, look at your charting and then give you some comments on it, things like that we have in the premium section. But across the board, like, anybody can use this. And the thing that I love most about it is there's nobody teaching your kids about the importance of, topics that they really shouldn't be learning about. All of this crazy stuff that if you open a typical Flow app or all of these other apps, they're inundated with all of this like sexual deviance and stuff that really is not good for them. It's actually one app. I knew I had to make an app, Sean, when I was using one of these other apps just as a trial. And I had gone several days without charting, and it actually came back and it said, there's a possibility you may be pregnant. You should go to Planned Parenthood.
Gosh,
I was like, this is it. I am making this app right now.
that's
because
wild.
yeah, like it was so crazy.
No, and you obviously then open up, particularly for young women, of just other people or apps or AI talking to them about sex or introducing them to sex. Every guy, you explaining all that, of course, is just a reflection of how useless the male body is and how amazing the female body is and everything that it can do. And men, our bodies are designed to like run over a hill, and protect people. But it's amazing everything that goes on. And recently, my son, he's 10. And so I haven't had like the talk with him, but we've had these little conversations. But he asked Mary Lisa, like, but where does the baby actually come from? Like how does it come out of the tummy? And she said, well, boys and girls have different private parts. He's like, yeah. She's like, it comes out of our private part. And he goes like, oh. And he looks up, and it's that moment that every man has had in his life where he's like, I'm so glad I'm not a woman. Like, it's just this unbearable thing. And even the women are like, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. There's nothing like it. And it is, because he's like, does it hurt? She's like, yeah, it can hurt, but it's impossible to know, like, I don't want a watermelon coming out of my private part, And so it's just amazing. But I want to ask you, we can wrap up with this because I know, where you've been very generous with your time. Okay, so if you're on contraception forever because that's just what you do, right? And it hides all of these things, correct? So when somebody comes to you and they say, hey, I think I'm infertile or I'm having fertility problems, they said you were the best witchcraft doctor in Philly to help me with this. What is the time frame from they come to your office, they're on contraception, to you, number one, being able to identify they're infertile or not, and also them being able to conceive?
So typically when they come to me, they're not on contraception, right? Because if it's an infertility patient, they've already been off of contraception.
Okay.
They're trying to get months to a year. And so typically what happens is within the first 5 minutes of conversation with them, I can point out at least 3 things that they likely have. Just in talking to them about their cycles and their symptoms, like the majority of these women have been through IVF, and now they're coming to me because they didn't like how they were treated in IVF. They felt like they were like cattle going through the system, and it was so impersonal. And they also felt like they were just not being given any answers and being told that IVF was the only way and that they didn't have any other options, and that everything with their husband was fine and that they were the issue, but it was unexplained infertility. So they couldn't really say what the issue was. And 9 times out of 10, I'll just, in collecting their history and asking them about their bleeding patterns, their mucus patterns, do they have any pain with their periods? Do they have any PMS symptoms? All of those things, I can almost always, like, you likely have low progesterone, you likely have PCOS, you might have thyroid dysfunction, and then we check labs with the next cycle. We do timed labs on day 3, 4 of the cycle, and then we do an ultrasound that's specifically timed on day 5 to 7 of the cycle. That usually reveals a lot. And then we start working on those things. And then the next thing is I have them draw labs all the way through their cycle, like about 12 different lab draws to look at their estrogen before they ovulate, and then to look at estrogen and progesterone after they ovulate. And that's super revealing. But at the same time, we'll offer them, the husband can come to us for male fertility, and then we would do a full workup on his thyroid, on his hormones, on his insulin resistance, on his vitamin levels, all of those things, which they never get from the infertility doctors. And we'll also have them do a semen analysis, which is totally in alignment with our faith, where they can make love to one another and collect the sample in that way and then send it off. And we'll have that analyzed. And typical semen analysis, when they're analyzed by the IVF doctors, they're analyzing it in terms of IVF. So they're telling these men that even if they have very low numbers, it's totally fine because they're picking and choosing the sperm that they're putting in the petri dish. But for natural fertility, you need way more sperm and way more healthy sperm that don't have two heads or two tails that can actually move forward. And so when we look at the semen analysis that they've been told is normal, we will reanalyze it in terms of natural fertility. And 9 times out of 10, we'll be telling them, no, actually, your morphology is low and your sperm have too many heads or too many tails, and they're not moving in the right direction. So you need to address these issues. You need to take these supplements, or you need to fix your blood sugars, or you need to cleanse your liver, or you need to address your thyroid issues, or stop smoking marijuana, or whatever. And then we have them redo the semen analysis, and it's much better. So there's, I mean, right then and there, 50% of the fertility is being completely put aside and ignored because IVF is what makes these doctors money. So they don't have any desire to like really delve deep and try and solve the issues if their ultimate goal is to have as many people as possible doing IVF.
When you explain that, the whole time I'm thinking, which I've thought about a lot with every single one of our pregnancies, when you just follow this 9-month amazing journey, it's a miracle anybody's born ever. I mean, everything that has to go right. You're talking about like blood sugar and liver detox. I'm like, what the heck does that have to do with fertility? And people don't realize, I know I don't, just when you explained all of that so well, so much has to go right. And it just shows our dysfunctional thinking that we've taken this unbelievable miracle that is
Totally.
you know, a baby, and we have just, number one, taken it for granted, and number two, tried to control it, or number three, the worst, is to kill it. And it's just it's unbelievable. And that I'm so glad we did this podcast, because we sort of haven't done in a while, just the whole miracle of life and what a gift life is. And I'm so happy. I know I speak for our listeners, many of whom know you and know who you are, of just how grateful we are that you're in medicine and that you're an OBGYN and that you're doing this, and that you're also not alone, that there are many great doctors across the country that are NAPRO trained and do so much in NFP and are just wonderful, wonderful doctors. I know our practice in Houston, where Mary Lisa goes, is absolutely booming, and the hospital has the right response, which is, y'all deliver a lot of babies and we make a lot of money. So, keep it going. It's just back to the basics. And so it's really, really great. And I can't thank you enough for everything that you've done and have done just as a 40 Days for Life leader, and the many hats that you wear.
No, it's such a joy for me. And God is so good. I mean, He's blessed us with so much joy, so much peace, so many miracles in my family. And just the biggest thing is that everybody loves Him and loves to practice our faith. So that's, I think, if you can start from there, if you can achieve that I don't think you really need anything else.
Yeah, no, you don't. And it's so edifying being part, as you know, of the 40 Days for Life family, and meeting the best people, and meeting those who have suffered from infertility, meeting those who have gone through an abortion, meeting those who have a lot of kids and struggle to, raise kids. Raising kids is very hard. And, it becomes a great family. I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks, a month, at the symposium in Phoenix. And so it is a dry heat, and we are making T-shirts for our leaders that say that so that they can be reminded. But we will be together in a couple of weeks. So thank you for coming on today. And I want to remind our listeners, if you saw our email recently, we have new patriotic gear at 40 Days for Life gear.com. And so be sure to get that. We are celebrating 250 years of America. So there's some great pro-life American t-shirts and hats. We got some 1776 stuff. So if you love America and you're pro-life, go check out our new patriotic gear that we will have throughout the rest of the start of the summer and the rest of the summer. So thank you for listening. Please rate, review, and share this podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless you.